about that time when my daughter was born is when I started to backslide in my life, in marriage.
So what caused that?
I started getting a wandering eye, and it progressed. It progressed to me having one affair with one person.
So you talked to him, but you didn't talk to your wife.
I did not.
Did he not encourage you to talk to your wife?
He actually told me not to tell a single person in this world.
And you're still involved in the church and all of these things. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
However, completely living a double life. Like completely living a double life.
I can do this and I can still be a Christian over here and do that. So was that kind of what was going on?
Yeah, it's exactly what was going on. You start to live a double life. Started drinking heavily, like heavily drinking. I realized who I wasn't who I wanted to be anymore, at all.
Have you ever had a job where you wore multiple hats? And I'm not talking about a physical hat that you wear. I'm talking about playing multiple roles at that same job. You know, like a waiter who is also the cook, cashier, and janitor. Sometimes that happens in life as well, but sometimes the extra roles that we are playing are secret. And if people knew about those roles, it wouldn't be good. I'm talking about living a double life. Sometimes this happens when a person is unhappy with their life, and sometimes it's just temptation that creeps in from the enemy that causes us to wander. Whatever the case, this path leads to destruction, heartache, and pain. How does a person change a double life and heal from the ensuing damage? Does God still love me? And can He bring healing to my broken life? These are questions that I want to ask our guest today as he shares his life change story with us. I'm Eric Hutchinson, and this is the If Nothing Changes podcast. So, hey, friend, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Mike Ruffino. I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas. We've been in this area for about a decade, for about 10 years, and I am a home inspector. I inspect homes for real estate transactions. Also own a business that builds custom tailgate trailers and event trailers and concession trailers and things of that nature. And we own a snow cone stand. So
Mike, I know you, and I'm really excited to have you here. So for the audience, I've hired, my clients have hired Mike to do many home inspections through the years, and he does an outstanding job. So if you live in Northwest Arkansas and you need a home inspector, he's your guy. He's fantastic. But one day we were talking, and he started sharing just a little bit of his story, and I thought he needs to be on my podcast. And so I invited him. Gosh, it's probably been a year ago now, but he's finally here, and I'm really excited about it. So, Michael, every story has a beginning, and so I like to kind of walk the listeners through your story. So, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about where you grew up, where you were born, where you grew up, and a little bit about your family of origin.
Okay. So I was born in Houston, Texas, and I was raised there. At a very young age, probably about junior high, we moved to a smaller suburb of Houston called Tomball. And we lived there until I was a senior in high school. We were very involved in FFA. We had a small farm. We had some quarter horses, and we raised market steers and things of that nature. And I played football. Football was basically my life. And so my senior year in high school, my dad worked for a company called Laddish Company, and they closed the Texas division down, and we were moving to Russellville, Arkansas. So 2 weeks before my senior year started, we moved to Russellville, Arkansas, and I ended up graduating high school from Russellville.
So do you have brothers and sisters in your family? So
Yep.
How many do you have, and where are you in the pecking order, and how'd you get along with them?
So I have one sister. She is 4 years older than I am, and I was adopted. So I'm the youngest of two, and she lives in Tennessee now, and my mother lives with her. But she and I, our relationship was typical sibling relationship. We fought like cats and dogs, and we loved each other more than most family members probably do. I would do anything for her, and she'd do anything for me.
So you told me something that I didn't know about you, that you were adopted. So when did you find that out?
It actually backfired on my sister. I think when I was about 8 or 9, she told me I was adopted, and it was to be hateful, to be mean. And my parents turned it into a way of, you're special. Not everyone gets adopted, things of that nature. But I was adopted at a really young age. So my parents started the adoption process when I was born.
Okay.
And they got me when I was about 2 years old is when it was completely finished. And so I had my real mother was a single mother. She was in high school. When I was 18, I started looking for her, and when I was 28, I found her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How did that go?
I introduced myself. She had a lot of questions about, I wondered what happened to you, and I had explained to her that I was married, had a couple kids. She had grandchildren if she wanted to know them. And so about a couple months went by. We went to Grapevine, Texas, where she lives. And we met her, and she met her grandkids, and it was a great meeting, and everything was, it was great. And it's the only time I've ever met her or talked to her.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's amazing. So whenever you were growing up, let's, go back to Texas. Was religion in your family growing up or not?
So we were Catholic.
Okay.
And my dad grew up Catholic. He was an altar boy. He went to St. Joseph High School in Houston. Devout Catholics. And so that's what I knew about Christianity, and that's what I knew about being a Christian. We didn't go to church every Sunday. We went for Palm Sunday. We went for Easter Sunday. We went for midnight mass, and we would go on kicks where we would go to church pretty regular. And then we wouldn't, but anyone that's Catholic versus somebody that is, a Christian that goes to a Baptist church or things, it's different. It's different. The way the worship is, the way,
right.
It's just different. So, I was raised to know right from wrong. I was raised to know who Jesus was and what he meant to us. But I wasn't saved until a much later age.
Right. There wasn't really the emphasis on personal relationship. It was more the church.
Correct.
Did you go through confirmation?
I did not go through confirmation. I just didn't.
Yeah.
My parents put me through catechism class, and we started all that, but we weren't that kind of family that followed through.
Yeah.
That way. Uh-huh.
So what was it like with your parents? Were you close to your dad and your mom? Did you feel, so I talk a lot on here about dysfunctions, and a lot of times when we get to be adults, we go back and we look at our past and go, oh yeah, there was a problem with that. And I didn't really notice it as much when I was a kid, but yeah, there was was there any of that kind of stuff, or did you feel like it was just a pretty normal growing up?
It was pretty normal.
Yeah.
My parents, they treated me just like I was their own child. If my sister would have never told me I was adopted, to this day, I probably would have never known that I was adopted.
Wow.
That's the way my whole family treated me.
Yeah. That's a blessing.
Yeah, it is. My parents were, they were kind of parents that if I was on the underwater basket weaving team and we were playing a game, they would be at the underwater basket weaving team game.
Wow.
They supported everything that we did, whether it be my sister or myself.
Well, it sounds like you had a very healthy childhood growing up. So were you confident? Were you one of those were you type A personality and out there, or were you a little bit more reserved? What did you believe about yourself?
No, I was 100% type A.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And started playing football whenever I was the first time I could pick up a football, like played Pee Wee football, and my dad coached the team, and it was very competitive, so if we played a sport, we played to win, we wanted to be the conference champions every year. We wanted, and that's just the way it was. And so that instilled, I guess, a winning nature in my mind.
So did you get into any of the party lifestyle in high school, or did you stay away from that?
So I really didn't. And the reason that I didn't was my dad's philosophy was if you're going to drink alcohol, you're going to drink alcohol in front of me. So if you and your friends want to drink, you come to the house, I will supply the alcohol, and y'all can do whatever you want in my sight, and I know you're not going to be on the road driving. I know you're not going to be out doing things wrong. And that's kind of the way that it worked, So, was alcohol, beer mostly in my life? Yes, it was. Did I drink it way too much, more than my dad probably knew? Yes, it was. But that's how it worked on Friday nights. You played football and I played at a school called Tomball. And at that time it was a football mill. So we played for several state championships, very seldom lost football games. Like several Division I players came out of Tomball. A lot of them played in the NFL as well.
Wow.
It's just we played football. That's what we did.
That's Texas.
Yeah. And so that kind of progressed whenever we moved from Houston area to Arkansas. And so football in Russellville was completely different than football in the Houston area. And so my drinking kind of turned into smoking marijuana. And so me and a couple friends that I played football with, we would actually smoke marijuana before football games because we thought it cleared our mind. We played better. It was dumb. It was stupid.
So how'd you get introduced to that? I mean, so you're a new kid in Russellville. Was it just the people that you connected with that maybe they were involved in? They said, "Hey, why don't you try this?" And you did, and you liked it. Okay, so you got into that a little bit, but Dad didn't know about that, right? So they kind of kept that a secret.
I did. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's when I started kind of hiding things, things that I knew were wrong, but we're going to do it anyways. And so. Yeah, and then some life choices with girlfriends and just.
So did you have serious relationships or did you bounce around a little bit?
So I had a girlfriend that was still in the Houston area, and we had dated since junior high. And the plan was we were going to go to college together because I had planned on playing football at this college, and she graduated the year before I did, and so she went to school. And then the following year, when I moved to Russellville, I was going to graduate and then go to that school and play football as well. And so I had multiple, even though she was my girlfriend, and she was 400 or 500 miles away, I had a lot of girlfriends in Russellville, like a lot of girlfriends in Russellville.
So why do you think? I mean, you didn't. I'm assuming that you didn't see that at your house. I mean, that your dad was loyal to your mom, and that there was that. So do you feel like that maybe there was a character defect of lust or something there? I mean, what made you decide to do? You had a girlfriend there. I mean, you could have broke up with her, and So what do you think led you into that?
I've thought about that a lot, Eric, and I've tried to figure out how I got there. I don't know. I honestly don't know what drove that, but my senior year in high school, when I was in Russellville, probably had 8 or 9 girlfriends.
Wow.
Multiple girlfriends.
Yeah.
And doing inappropriate things that adolescent teenagers don't need to be doing.
Yeah.
And so the reality of this story is 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I was supposed to go to College Station and enroll and start spring practice. And the girl that I was dating at that time that became my wife got pregnant. And so I had to make a life choice of, what do we do? What do I do? And probably the first time in my life that I made a decision that I thought was the right decision. This is what I need to do. And so I did not go to College Station. I did not tell my girlfriend in Texas what had happened. I married.
So now your girlfriend, you still had a girlfriend in Houston.
I did.
Right.
Yes.
Even though you were dating a girl here and, got her pregnant. And so now you're deciding whether I marry her or I don't marry her. You haven't told the girl down in Texas. So did all of that come to a head or what happened?
So I decided that I was going to marry this girl and I was going to be a father and I was going to do the right thing. I was just going to manage through it because that's the way I was raised, I'm going to manage through it. And so I came home, and it was probably one of the scariest moments in my life. I came home to tell my mom and dad what had happened and what I was going to do. And at that time, my dad, extremely disappointed, extremely mad, and he basically threw me out of the house that day. Like, helped me load my stuff in my truck, and I left the house. Later on, the day that I got married, he came to my wedding and apologized, and he had talked to my mother and probably his family and realized, hey, he made a mistake, and hey, he's doing the right thing, and you need to support him. And and our relationship was never bad. It wasn't that at all. It's just extremely disappointed the decision that I made.
So you got married then right
Yep.
after that, or
Yep.
or not? Okay, so you made the decision to get married.
So 3 weeks out of high school, got married, and shortly thereafter that had our first child. And so at that time, I took a job with Tyson Foods, and I took a job that was the highest paying job that they had for an hourly team member, and I was actually hanging live chickens.
Now this was in Russellville.
In Russellville,
right? Okay, so you're hanging live chickens,
Hanging live
and that's
chickens.
the highest paid job.
That's the highest paying floor job that they had in that plant. So what I did was I hung chickens at night, and I went to school during the day, and we had a family. I had a wife and I had a child, and I was able to do that for about a semester and a half, and just wasn't going to work anymore.
Yeah.
That was burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I decided that I couldn't go to school anymore, and I went to work at Tyson Foods.
So how are you on the being faithful to your wife and all of that? Because that was a problem with your. Did you ever? And you finally told the girl in Houston, I guess, right? I mean, you had to, right?
Yeah, I left that out. I'm sorry. So when I came home and told my dad what had happened, and my mom, my dad, one of the first things he said to me was, "You need to call," and her name was Wendy. He said, "You need to call Wendy and let her know." And I never did.
Really?
I never did.
Oh no.
Yeah, and her family and my family, of course, we dated since junior high. We were all friends. They like her brothers were friends with my sister because they were the same age, and we all knew each other. I just never, I never did the right thing. I never, for lack of better terms, I never manned up and called her and said what happened.
Did she just hear through the grapevines? Or, I mean, your dad called his friend and said, hey, you might want to tell your daughter that, hey, my son's married, or what?
I think that it was about a year later, maybe. I finally, I can't remember if she called me or I called her, but I finally, about a year after I had been married, Ryan was about a year old, we did have that conversation.
Okay. So you're married a year and a half. You got a child. So how you doing on being faithful? I mean,
actually doing quite well.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
good.
Actually doing quite well. And the reason that I'm doing quite well is because I don't have time to do anything else.
You're burning the candle, right? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And so the thing that changed, the thing that changed shortly after that was when I decided that I couldn't go to school anymore to make ends meet. I actually took a second job. So I worked a full-time job during the day, and then I worked a full-time job at night.
Wow.
And then I'd sleep about 4 hours. And I just, to tell you the truth, brother, I just didn't have time. Like I was raising a small child and working. That's what I did.
So what happened? You dropped out of college,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So where'd you go? What'd you do next? Did you go full? I mean, did you just keep your jobs and keep going, or what happened?
Yep. So kept hanging chickens at Tyson Foods, and then I took a job as a car stereo installer. So I was installing car stereos and home stereo equipment and things of that nature. And so I just worked those two jobs until sleep deprivation caught up, and I just couldn't do that anymore. And then I'd learned enough through working at Tyson to maybe expand what I was doing for them. And so I started to promote myself within that company. So
okay.
I moved up to a line lead and started running, lead. That turned into becoming a superintendent. And then that started a moving process where we moved. And so in my career at Tyson Foods, I was with them for about 24 years. We lived in 6 different states, and I was in about 10 different plants.
That's a long time to stay with one company. So now, how was now? Let me come back to faith. So you raised Catholic? Did you try to you say, I'm a father now? We've got a family. Let's go to Catholic church, or did you no religion at all?
Some religion, and the reason I say that is because my wife's family, her mother and father, they were Baptists. And so they would invite us to church, and we would go to church. And to tell you the truth, I would go, but I was just there.
Yeah.
I really wasn't hearing the word. I really wasn't involved in worship. I didn't. And then as my relationship with my father-in-law grew, my what I did for the church started to change. How I grew with the church started to change. And so I got involved. I started teaching a Sunday school class.
Really?
Yep. And then our church decided to add on, and so we built a fellowship hall. And my father-in-law and I basically built the fellowship hall. We built all the cabinets for it. We roughed it in.
So how old are you at this point? Because you said you were, 24 years with Tyson, so that's a long time. So where are you when you're with your father-in-law? Are you not in Russellville anymore?
We'd moved to Atkins at that time.
Where is that?
Atkins was it's about 8 or 9 miles west of Russellville.
Okay, so it's still in Arkansas.
Still in that general area.
Okay.
So in Atkins, Arkansas. And we... we get involved in the church, and this is in probably 94, 95, through 96 in those timeline.
How old's your son?
So he was born in 89, so that means he's 8 or 9.
Okay.
8 or 9 years old.
So did you give up the marijuana and alcohol? I mean, or did you still, like after work, go meet with the buddies at all, or no?
No. So when I worked for Tyson Foods at that time, they had a drug-free policy. And so you could be randomly drug tested. And if you failed at any time,
you're gone.
Lost your job. So when I got married, all of that basically stopped.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good, but you didn't bring that in with your child and everything. That's awesome.
No.
Okay.
And so during that time, I was trying to implement, sports. And my son liked to play baseball, and so I played a lot of baseball. I coached his teams. I was very, very involved. And then in 1994 is when my daughter was born. And so she was born, and we were involved in church. And so that's when my involvement with the Free Will Baptist Church in Atkins started to gain steam, I guess we'll say that.
So gain steam. So are you talking about now you're starting to realize that you need a relationship?
I'm starting to hear the word.
Okay.
I'm starting to understand what's being said to me.
So what started turning the light on there? I mean, was there an event, or were you at a service and all of a sudden the light came on, or was it a very gradual process there?
So it was gradual. And the reason I say it was gradual is because my change was because I was watching the men around me. And they became my mentors without them knowing they were my mentors. Saw how they acted at church, saw how they acted away from church, and then started to realize that this is what it looks like done right. And so about that time when my daughter was born is when I started to backslide in my life, in marriage.
So what caused that? So you say backslide in your life. So you're not talking about religion there. No. Now you're talking about your relationship with your wife. How long have you guys been married at this time? And that's when your daughter was born.
Yep. So we got married in 88, and this would have been in 94. So shortly after my
6-7 years then, or something like that. So now honeymoon's over. You guys got kids, routine, all that stuff. So what was it, do you think? I mean, did you analyze that and say, where was it I started? I mean, were you looking at porn on the side? Was there something? I mean, where was it that the enemy got in and started pulling you away?
So I think it was probably selfish. I started to become extremely selfish because I had worked multiple jobs for a really long time. I had sacrificed quite a bit. And at that time, I didn't realize that that was all good things. That's what godly men do. And I got extremely selfish. And after my daughter was born, my wife probably went through some postpartum depression, and I had no idea what that was. She had no idea what that was. And just like in most marriages at about that time, I started getting a wandering eye, and it progressed. It progressed to me having one affair with one person. And it didn't just happen. I sought it out. And it was somebody that worked in the facility that I worked in. So interacted with them every day, saw them every day at work. It became inappropriate quickly, probably more friendly bantering before it became inappropriate. And then as advancements were started to put forward toward both of us, and the reaction to those probably expedited me having an affair.
Were you able to keep it secret?
I did. I kept it a secret from everyone that ever could have known. Let me answer that a little bit differently. Looking back, my wife knew.
Mm-hmm.
She knew. In my opinion, every wife knows, or at least has an inclination. So that turned into me going to a church service at Atkins Free Will Baptist Church in 1996. It was
So what led to that? Did you have a fight with your wife, or did you say I got to stop playing this double life? What happened that led you to that service?
So the specific morning, we woke up and it was a wet, dreary day. It was raining. And it was not a day that most of the time we would have taken the opportunity to stay in bed and stay home. And it was a wet, dreary day. But my daughter was very, very emphatic that we went to church that day. We were going to church. We were going to church because at that age, she wanted to go to Sunday school. She wanted candy. She wanted to see her friends. But she stayed on me to go to church. And so my son and daughter stayed home that morning, and she and I went to church. And so I was in the pew by myself, basically, because my mother-in-law and father-in-law were sitting behind me. And so I was in the pew by myself. And this was what I call my train wreck moment. When you see a train wreck, it changes you. It changes how you feel about trains. It changes how you feel about how you cross train tracks. It changes your life, And so Brother Darrell Barnes was the pastor, and he sang a special that morning, and he sang the Midnight Cry. And I don't know if you've ever heard a Southern Free Will Baptist Church sing the Midnight Cry, but it will set you up to hear the word. And so he sung. And I didn't realize it, but he started preaching, but I didn't realize what the song service had done. It had set me up to receive the word. And so just like every Sunday morning, he preached. But this Sunday morning, he preached, and I can't remember the book that he preached out of, but he preached specifically about adultery, and about what adultery is and what it looks like and what it does to you. And he preached about everything. And it's a little bit different then than it is now, but he also preached about what happens if you don't change. He preached about what's going to happen to you if you do not change. So that led into you can't change unless you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And the more he preached, the smaller the room got, and the less amount of people that were in there. And by the end of his message, I was the only person sitting in the room. He was preaching at me, and I got up that morning and went to the altar and gave it all up, and I surrendered, and the Lord met me there.
So that is a literal coming to Jesus moment.
Yep.
So you came to Jesus,
Yep.
and so
got baptized
that day.
It was 2 weeks later.
Okay.
Because we had to, our church didn't have a baptismal, so we had to go to another church to get baptized. And so I got baptized, and we joined the church, and
So let me ask you this. So you come to Jesus. I mean, things are changing inside of you, but you've got this secret,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, was that looming back here a little bit? And did you decide that, man, I got to come clean with this? And so, yeah, tell us about that.
So looking back, this is where I missed the mark. Looking back, this is where I missed the mark because I confessed to my father-in-law. I told him what happened, and he was very passionate and very, believe it or not, he confessed a lot of things to me that I didn't know about him.
Wow.
And he and I became very close through that. But the reality of that is I never confessed it to my wife. I didn't. You know, I missed the mark on that one.
So you talked to him, but you didn't talk to your wife.
I did not.
Did he not encourage you to talk to your wife?
He actually told me not to tell a single person in this world. He said, you need to leave it at the cross and it needs to go away, and you need to, you know, probably not the best advice. No, not the best advice, but that's what I did. And there was a few times that it came up and I skirted around it. But no, that's Eric. That's where I missed the mark. I did not confess it to my wife.
Did you break things off with the person that you were having an affair with? Okay, so you broke that off and started changing some things in your life and moving forward there. So what happened? I mean, how long did you keep that a secret? I mean, you stayed married, you've got kids. I mean, now you've got a relationship with Christ. Was the guilt eating you up? I mean, did you feel like you should tell your wife, or did it bother you at all or not?
It really didn't. You know, surprisingly, it really didn't. It was almost like I had an uncanny ability to just put it in the past. Just put it in the past.
Yeah.
The reality of it is looking back at my story, it just left the crack open for Satan to be able to get back in because I'm going to fast forward to 2006. 2006 is about 10 years later.
Okay.
And my career my career has advanced to the point to where I'm a plant manager.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
So in 2006, Ryan would have been 17, 18.
Okay.
And Lauren would have been 12 years old.
And you're still involved in the church and all of these things. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
However, completely living a double life. Like completely living a double life.
Okay, so now I've missed something. So you had this coming to Jesus moment. It seemed like everything was great, and you did. So you left the door open for Satan. So how did he sneak? How did he get back into your life? I mean, was it alcohol? Was it? I mean, was it more relationships, or what happened?
So it was what I call bending the truth. It was a life that I had created through my job of bending the truth. So every day was, how far can I bend the truth and get away with this? You know, how far can I manipulate numbers and get away with this? And how far can I manipulate people to do what I need them to do? You know, and it just, the more that I did that, the more the invincibility factor came into play, and that progressed into wandering eyes.
So do you think that because you didn't confess with your wife, you didn't come clean, as we say in recovery, you didn't come clean with it, and so you said you left a little door open there, that was kind of led you into being deceitful in other areas because I put that away and that's gone. It's in the past. I can do this and I can still be a Christian over here and do that. So was that kind of what was going on?
Yeah, it's exactly what was going on. You know, you start to live a double life again, even though you've had that moment and you learn or you understand right from wrong and you have a chance to create that relationship, but you don't grasp that relationship. And so you leave the opportunity to go back to leading that double life. And it didn't happen for me overnight. It just slowly progressed until one day you wake up and it's 2006 and you're having multiple affairs and you're a horrible person and you're manipulating people and you're making horrible financial decisions because you're not praying about them, and you're not, you're not paying your tithes, and it just progressively gets worse,
So it sounds like 2006, something came to a head. So
it did. Found out through the grapevine that my wife was having an affair. Wasn't really upset about it because I was having affairs. I actually used that as a tool to justify what I was doing, and marriage was not godly. It was not God-centered at all. Raising my children was not God-centered at all. I say that I was a good father, but at this point, like, I saw my son play in a state championship baseball game, but I didn't watch him play. I didn't watch him every play high school game that he did. I watched my daughter be crowned homecoming queen, but I didn't watch her cheer at every game. Supporting my kids was not what I was doing. And so that led into us getting a divorce. And so at this point, brother, I went through a divorce, and it took a while for that to happen, several years for that to progress into finalizing a divorce and us splitting up. And at that point, brother, I decided that I wanted out of that situation so bad that I took all the debt. I took all of the vehicles that had payments. I agreed to pay her an alimony payment. And at the end of each month, after I made all of my payments, I had about $18 a month to live on and to buy fuel. And that led into living off of credit cards, which created more debt. Started drinking heavily, like heavily drinking, and got into a point to where I ate Pop-Tarts and Fruit Smiles and drank a lot of blueberry tequila. And that's what I did. And then that led into spending a lot of time by myself at home, that led into watching pornography, which leads into everything that goes with that, which led into having still multiple affairs with married women. And it was out of control.
So what was the time frame? So 2006 is whenever you kind of, that's when you discovered her affair, and then things just kind of fell apart from there. How old is your daughter? Your son was 18 or so, you said.
And my daughter was about 12 or 13 at
So
that
she was 12,
time.
13. So the divorce had to be hard on them. Did she get custody of the kids?
So yes, she had custody. And so by this time, Ryan was old enough that it didn't matter.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He could make his own choices.
But Lauren lived with her. So by the time it was all done and we were completely separated and living apart, I'd ended up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I was managing Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and they lived in the Russellville area still. And so I would see Lauren quite a bit, my daughter. It all started to catch up with me. I couldn't make ends meet. I couldn't make ends meet financially.
And you were spending money on alcohol and that kind of stuff.
Yep. And so I filed bankruptcy. I had to file bankruptcy. And I filed, can't remember what chapter it was, but it was one where you pay back all your debtors, all your creditors. So I paid everybody back what I owed them.
Really? How long did that take?
6.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So paid everybody back. And the reason I was able to do that is because through this process, I met my wife that I have now.
Oh.
And so
how did that happen? So, I mean, I feel like I'm missing stuff here. You're kind of on the outskirts here. You're drinking, you're having affairs, and all this stuff. So how did you meet your current wife? And were you in a bad situation, emotionally and spiritually when you met her, or did you have a turnaround before you met her?
No, I was a hot mess whenever I met her, and I was managing this plant in Pine Bluff, and she was actually the quality assurance manager in that facility. She was a single mom raising a daughter, and she had been raising her on her own for probably 10 years, maybe 11 years. She knew that I was not living right. She knew the person that I was. She knew who I was both spiritually. She knew who I was financially. She knew I wasn't eating right. And so that turned into one day she invited me to come to her house to eat a meal, to eat dinner. And I took it at that time it was an opportunity. Hey, she liked me, and this may turn into something, but looking back at it and to hear her tell the story, no, brother. She just wanted me to eat real food.
She just wanted to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She just literally wanted me to
Compassion.
eat. Yes, 100%. And every single time I come over to eat, Allison would invite me to go to church. She would invite me to go to church, and every time I would decline. And the reason I'd decline is because I knew who I was. I wanted to stay as far away from that as possible because the devil had a stronghold on me. Like he was controlling my life, 100% controlling my life. And she just stayed persistent. Come to church with me and Peyton. Come to church with me and Peyton every time. And I would decline every time. And one Saturday, the plant had run and we were running. And I got done and I had gone home and credit card was maxed out. Didn't have any room to buy any more alcohol. Like, I wouldn't say it was rock bottom, but like at the end of the rope, you should say. And I was laying there in bed and something just kept telling me, just go to church, just go to church, just go. And so that night I called Allison and said, hey, I'm going to go to church with you and Peyton in the morning. And she said, really? And I said, yeah, I'm going to go to church. And so went to bed that night, woke up in the morning. It's like, I'm not going to church, and I tried to find every reason why I was not going to go to church. Ended up taking a shower, shaving, getting dressed, went to church.
Now, were you guys dating at this time at all? It was still just hey, I'm providing some food for you, come over. But you guys had to have some kind of a friendship by this time, right?
We were becoming friends,
Yeah.
and we were coming to an understanding, and I was starting to share with her, like she would see me walk to work. I was a manager in a facility, and I didn't have money for fuel. I owned 3 vehicles, but I didn't have money for fuel, and I was walking to work, Wow. So, I mean, it wasn't that hard to figure out. So she knew everything about me. And so her birthday had, so I went to church, and Brother Gary was the preacher, and he preached that day. And he's also the man that ended up marrying Allison and I. We got married in the church the right way. And so he preached that morning, and he preached about backsliding, about strongholds, about everything in my life, addictions, everything that was happening in my life, he preached about that morning.
So it's sounding a little deja vu here from your salvation experience. I mean,
almost exactly the same, but in a different church with a different pastor.
Wow.
And by the time he got through with the message, I felt like I was the only one in the pews by myself preaching right at me. And on that ride home to take Allison and Peyton home, I told Allison everything.
Wow.
I told her who I was. I told her everything,
How did she take it?
Surprisingly well. And the reason being is you'll meet her. She knew already, she was telling me something I already knew. I was just getting it off my chest. I was just truly confessing it to.
You were coming clean.
I was. And at this point we weren't even dating. We were just acquaintances. We worked together, and so that it started to evolve into us dating. And her birthday had come along, and she had been a single mom for so long. She didn't really celebrate birthdays. She didn't really, and so I like tennis shoes. You probably know this about me, but I have a lot of tennis shoes. And so I looked at her feet. I saw what size shoes she wore, and I went to Little Rock, and I can't remember how much money I had left, but I spent every bit of the money that I had left to buy a pair of tennis shoes for her birthday. And I had somebody unlock her office, and I left them in her office so when she come to work the next day that she would have a birthday gift, And so that's kind of what all started it. So now every year for our anniversary, she gets a pair of tennis shoes.
Aw, yeah. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So it just started to evolve from that. So I realized who I wasn't who I wanted to be anymore, at all. And I had to make some drastic changes in my life if I wanted to progress this relationship with Allison. And she's a very forward and a very truthful person. She's not beat around the bush. She is not. She's exactly what I needed in my life. The Lord put the person in my life that was supposed to be there. That's how it worked. And so she started to instill those values in me. And the more she instilled those values in me, the more I learned I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. So through that process, she acquired a job in Northwest Arkansas. And so she was going to be relocating to Northwest Arkansas. And so I needed to as well. I left and went to work for this other company, and Allison and I got married during that time. And then shortly after that, I adopted Peyton, and she became, a Garfino. So she had the same last name as all of our other children. So going through this process with this new company, I would not manipulate people. I would not manipulate numbers. I would not roll inventory. We were going to run the facility correct. I was dedicated to treating people right, and like we were going to do the right thing. And believe it or not, there were people in that facility that had worked for me in other facilities for the other company, and they knew who I was, and they were like, "Who is this guy?" This is not the guy that I knew when I worked in Van Buren, or this is not the guy I knew when I worked in Sedalia, Missouri.
Did they ask you, say, what happened?
They did.
Really? Did you tell them?
Yeah. And I told them, I said, I am changed. I am different. That company had hired a vice president of operations that I reported to, that he was me. He was the old me.
Wow.
And I respected him because he was my boss. But I was not going to go back to that. I just was not. And so that ultimately led to him firing me. I tell people I retired from the poultry industry, but at the end of the day, I got fired. He fired me because I was not willing to change. And looking back, it seemed like the darkest day in my life, because I had a new wife, just moved to Northwest Arkansas. Only thing I'd ever done in my life is run chicken plants. Like that's what I did. That was my life. And so rode home that day, and I called Allison and told her what had happened. I had no idea what her response was going to be. And it was uplifting. It was, we'll manage through it. We don't worry about it. We're going to manage through it. Another poultry company will hire you tomorrow if you want them to, and I'm not concerned at all, but to me, it was the end of the world. So that turned into, I had a lot of building experience. I'd bought and sold and remodeled, and I'd dealt with inspectors, government inspectors and city inspectors. And so I just decided, I think I want to be a home inspector, and so started a home inspection business. And that's how I met you, just knocking on doors, like just, hey, get to know me. I'm a good guy. You know? And so through this process, a dear friend of mine now at a basketball game invited me to go to this thing called Men's Encounter. And it's basically men getting up and doing what I'm doing right now.
Telling their story.
Telling everyone that we're all men. We all make mistakes. We basically live the same life. We're in a different shell, but we also have the same person to go to. And we also have freedom, in Christ. And it's not preaching. It's the word, and it's just men like me telling their story.
Yeah.
And a guy got up and talked about freedom from your past, and getting freedom from your past is from forgiveness. And I started to think about that feeling that I had in '96 whenever when I had first felt freedom from my past, and I thought about the things I'd done wrong, and I thought about the strongholds that I'd left out there, and I started thinking about my inspection business, and what was holding me up was letting go of the past. I couldn't move forward because I couldn't let go of the past. So I kind of had like an epiphany that weekend. And so that next Monday, I came, that Sunday I came home, and that next Monday, I started to call people, from the past that I had done wrong.
Really?
And started to ask people to forgive me
Wow.
for the person I was and things I'd done. Called my ex-wife and told her everything from day one.
Wow.
Asked her to forgive me, and she didn't. She used it as an opportunity to be mad, but that's okay. That's for her to it's for her and her relationship.
Yeah.
But called people that used to work for me, and I actually called the man that fired me. And I called Robert and I said, Robert, I don't know what it was that I did that made you feel like you needed to fire me. I'm not sure if it was something I said or something I've done, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for putting you in that position. And he basically had no response. Probably had never had that happen before in his life, but brother, the weight that and I got all kinds of answers. They were all over, or all kinds of response. They were all over the charts, from go kick rocks to I forgave you a long time ago, but the reality of it is all those strongholds that I had for years and years and years, I finally let them go. I finally let them go.
Praise God.
Yeah. The very last person that I called and asked to forgive me, it was a gentleman by the name of James Woods, and he was a production manager that worked for me in Blountsville, Alabama. Great man, really, really good man, but he was older, and he was set in his ways, and wasn't necessarily wrong. He was just set in his ways, and he and I didn't see eye to eye. And through a chain of events, I fired him. After a long career with that company, I fired him, and I replaced him with a younger person that I knew and trusted, and because I knew they were going to do what I needed them to do. So I called him and told him that I was a changed person, told him what had happened in my life, and told him I was sorry for what I'd done, and asked him to forgive me. And his response was, I forgave you the day I walked out of the plant, brother. About 3 months later, he died of cancer. So I'm glad I made that call.
Amen.
But the release, the pressure and the burden and everything that I've gotten rid of is it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because the men's encounter seemed to be such a kind of a turning point for you in receiving freedom, in your spiritual walk. So are you still involved at all with that? I mean, what are you doing? So in recovery, we always say you can't keep your sobriety unless you give it away. Mm-hmm. So what are you doing to give back some of what happened to you? Okay.
So I go to men's encounter every 6 months. Sometimes I go to 4 a year. Just depends. And I share testimonies. I've shared testimonies about financial freedom, and that's a whole nother story, brother. And then I share my testimony about freedom from your past. So lead Bible studies when I can,
Yeah.
And if somebody will allow me to tell them about Christ, I take every opportunity to do that because I feel like that's what we are supposed to do.
Amen. Well, brother, we're coming to the end of our time. If there is one message, we're in an elevator, and you've got one message that you can give the listeners real quick, what would that message be?
No matter what is happening in your life, trust the Lord. Even if it's a hard path, it's the right path. Trust in the Lord.
Mike, thanks so much for sharing your life change story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and maybe you know someone who has been living a double life, perhaps that person is you and you feel there is no hope for healing. Perhaps you feel you are stuck and that there is no way out. That's a lie from the enemy, and God wants to bring healing and purpose to your life. He wants to change your life and bring fulfillment and meaning, just like he did for Mike. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Hey, if you are still listening and you like this podcast, I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes because they will help to inspire change in your life. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a positive review because it helps to bring this podcast to others. But no matter what, may God bless you and may God bring positive change to your life.